in the city of Tallahassee's zero tolerance policy in regards to drug tests. And as most of you may know, we had an issue where one TPD employee tested positive. However, the same policy that should apply to all, seemingly it is not going to be applied to this officer. And personally, I have a problem with that. And that's why we held this press conference here in the Frenchtown area, because if you look behind me, there are a lot of people who have had to have consequences because of a testing positive in some way or another regarding the law. And it doesn't make sense to me. I don't know about you, but it doesn't make sense to me that a policy, or an ordinance, would apply to one and not apply across the board equally to employees of the city of Tallahassee or the citizens of Tallahassee. If you test positive, you should have to suffer the same consequences as your peers or as other citizens. I have a problem with this because I'm looking at how much money it's going to cost the city of Tallahassee when lawsuits abound because of this action. And so I want to, at this point now, just simply, state for the record that it's not about always what's legal, it's about what's moral and ethically right. That we as citizens and our public leaders should be held to a standard wherein their character and the ethics that they, live by or operate by should be high above where this situation is leading us to right now. And at this point right now, I want to ask Miss Serena Williams if she will come up, and have a few words.
Thank you. Yes.
Oh, pardon me.
Ooh, dropping everything.
You're good.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Good morning, everyone, and thank you. Hello. Again, my name is Serenity Williams. I am the campaign coordinator for Tallahassee ALERTT. We are a local organization working to advance the African American community through civic engagement efforts. And when I heard about this situation going on in the city, it really broke my heart because during the campaign season, we worked tirelessly to have deep conversations with all candidates and elected officials, and they promised us transparency through city business. And I just want to share with you all my story. My first job with the city of Tallahassee was at Truesdale Gymnastics Center. I was so excited. I was a participant for many years at the gym, and the moment I was old enough to apply, I did. I worked at Truesdale throughout high school and even summers as an undergrad. And throughout those years, I had to be drug tested randomly. In our city handbook that we were given, it states that the city of Tallahassee had a zero tolerance drug policy. If you tested positive for even marijuana, you would be terminated. It was my understanding that this was the rule for all city employees. As a coach, the most dangerous thing I could possess was a foam block. The most damage I could inflict was flick dust in your eye. But the police, they possess guns, deadly weapons, where, if they are not in their sound mind, can lead to the death of a citizen or a fellow officer. With that being the case, why wasn't this officer given the same treatment as any other city employee who tested positive for drugs? While police lock people up who look just like me for the pettiest of drug offenses, Tallahassee Police Department officers can continue collecting their salaries and benefits. As a gymnastics coach, I made about $8 an hour when I first started. Tallahassee Police Department officers are paid a salary that equates to about $25 to $30 an hour, and they get benefits. Why was I, a minimum wage gymnastics coach, held to a higher standard than an officer with the capabilities to kill and to take away people's freedom. I commend Commissioner Matlow for bringing up this issue at the City Commission meeting. It is outrageous that this is also going on while our Citizens Police Review Board is basically defunct. The mayor and the commissioners always evoke the phrase of public trust while simultaneously stabbing their citizens in the back. The people don't even know how much of our money will be spent on this venture. We can't even have a simple conversation of whether the police should be above the rule that every other city employee must follow. These backroom deals and ousting of whistleblowers is not becoming of a city commission or a person I would like to call my mayor. To build public trust, commissioners, you must allow citizens to have a say in how our city operates. There must be accountability for those in power, and that includes the police and their chief. I worry deeply about the path my hometown is taking. And Mr. Mayor, I ask respectfully, whose back do you have? Your citizens or the police?
I've been receiving calls from members of this community who are aware of this issue, this city issue, and their question has been to me, Pastor, what about my son or my daughter, who was on probation and tested positive, and now they're serving 3 to 5 years in prison because of a bad UA. And I have no answer for that right now. And I won't have an answer, until the city commission meeting is held and the decision is made. But I wanted to bring someone here who has had experience, and confrontational experience with the TPD officers and law enforcement in general, wherein you don't know whether or not they were on drugs at the time they encountered our citizens. And that's a question that we have to entertain, and that is, if this passes and this is allowed, then that means that police officers who arrest people for drugs could be on drugs. And so I want to ask DeForest Simmons to come up and share a minute with us.
Good morning. Yes, my name is DeForest Simmons. I'm a concerned citizen of Tallahassee. It's been my experience that there's a double standard of the application of the law here in Tallahassee, specifically, and I can best describe that from my own personal experience. Back in 1991, I was arrested for a charge for a guy that was 6'1", 150 pounds, with gray hair and gray beard. And my hair is black today, natural. God has preserved it so this moment can be shared with the public, with Tallahassee, with all governing bodies. And what exactly happened, the prosecutor, David Lewis, threw in 4 mugshots into the jury of me from previous arrests when I was under the influence of drugs. Today I'm not under the influence of drugs, but I'm still experiencing distractive surveillance behavior from the state in some form for that. There's a need for equal application of the law. And when we make errors, we need to take responsibility for it. Those people gave me a 5-year sentence for a robbery with a weapon for the guy that was 6'1", 150 pounds, with a gray beard. I was weighing 194. My hair is jet black at that time, and I was still being questioned for my identification. The case is public record. And the judge has made an observation of the guy throwing the surveillance, those arrest pictures into the jury, and nobody intervened. So this is a custom and practice issue, I think, where people in government, especially in law enforcement and criminal justice, feel that there's a double standard. When it's one of their own, they cover their backs. When it's the public, and especially if they're brown, they feel like they have no responsibility to be ethical. I would like to see a change. I try to demonstrate change. When I come into this community now, I don't come to get intoxicated. I come to moral good character that people can walk away from drug addiction, walk away from this lifestyle of being a burden to the city and to their families, and become constructive citizens. But we need the help of the government, of the officers, of all governing bodies in the criminal justice department, to be supportive of people who are really asserting themselves to be a contributor to this society. Thank you.
And so you see the problem that we are encountering, and especially in this neighborhood and on the south side, is that we don't know, as Mr. Simmons has said, we don't know whether that officer, is on drugs, whether that officer is high. We don't know these things, and we won't know going forward if this is allowed. And so at this point now, I want to ask Commissioner Matlow, to come and share with us the nuts and bolts of exactly what's going to take place on Wednesday and where he sees and his particular, opinion and point of reference on this particular issue we speak on today. Commissioner Matlow.
Thank you, Pastor Johnson. Commissioner Jeremy Matlow with the City of Tallahassee. I think when we look at this entire issue, what we've seen from city government, from city management and communications has frankly been a cover-up of illegal drug use at the Tallahassee Police Department. And now they're engaged in disinformation so the police department can continue to use drugs without any consequence if they see fit. That's wrong. That's unacceptable in the City of Tallahassee. We've created two different systems. If you get pulled over and you're in possession of somebody's prescription medication or an illegal substance, you're going to jail. If you're on probation and you test positive for an illegal substance, you're going to jail. If you work at the City of Tallahassee and you test positive for an illegal substance, you're going to be terminated unless you're an officer with the Tallahassee Police Department. We've created two different systems. The people entrusted with power, the people entrusted to protect our community, can do drugs without any consequence. So this case started back when we had the first drug test that we can find in city history where an employee didn't get terminated. And first, I want to say what we don't know. We don't know what drug this officer was on. We don't know if it was amphetamines or methamphetamines. We don't know if he accidentally took a prescription or if he took illegal drugs off the street. We don't know because the police department and the police chief did not do an investigation. There was no investigation done to determine why this officer was testing positive for drugs. So we have reports based on speculation that were put forward with no facts. I expect our law enforcement officer, our police department, to conduct investigations as part of their day-to-day job. Why can we not conduct an investigation when it comes to one of their own? Now, we've been told that this was just a medical decision and commissioners don't have any role, but quite frankly, what we've seen is city management is ignoring City of Tallahassee policy. It is very clear what happens when there's a positive drug test in the City of Tallahassee, and we have a city manager who is launching an autocratic regime to push his opinion down low, and we have commissioners that are staying silent and letting it happen, and I think that's a problem. We were told when we look at the initial drug test, when the HR director who did her job and said that this was wrong and it doesn't follow policy, she was terminated 2 days after this became public. As part of her conversations with the police chief, both of them admitted that they thought this clause in the police bargaining agreement with the union was an inadvertent mistake. It should not have been there, but they said, nonetheless, the chief has discretion. And our chief used his discretion to say it's okay to have law enforcement officers under the influence of illicit substances. That is wrong. But now we're here today because they're not stopping there. 2 days after this became public, they weren't wondering how they can keep our community more safe. They weren't asking themselves how we can make sure when you call 911 and you need help, the person who shows up at your door isn't under the influence of methamphetamines or cocaine or any illicit substance or upper while they have a firearm responding to your call. That's public safety. That's what we're looking to do. Instead, they decided to double down. Within 48 hours, they fired the HR director for standing up, and they moved forward a new agreement with the police union that does not eliminate this clause that allows for drug use within the police department. And so instead of doing the right thing, they're doubling down on the wrong thing. So if this agreement goes forward, let me take a step back. This final agreement was never shared with city commissioners. It was never shared with the city attorney's office for review. This final agreement was never shared with the city treasurer clerk's office. So this agreement that's already been sent to the police union that our city manager has already agreed to never went under legal review. It never went under actuarial review, so we don't know the true cost. They're saying $6 million, but it will be much more as pension costs increase and the city's costs increase. That's why we have standard policies to make sure things are done right. That's why we have legal counsel to make sure we don't get ourselves into wrongdoing. But this city manager, he doesn't care. He's just steamrolling through because he thinks he has the power. He thinks he has 3 commissioners who aren't willing to stand up and do the right thing. And on Wednesday, we will see. Maybe he is right. Maybe we have a mayor that is okay with drug use in our police department. Maybe we have an entire commission that is. But I know when I talk to members of the community who have reached out to my office, they're shocked. This is not normal. This is not a standard for the police. So when we first had an update on the police bargaining agreement from the city manager, he did not come with anything written that he was going to propose. In fact, he said they hadn't put an offer on the table at all yet. He said, when asked how he would pay for this contract, he scoffed and said he did not know. This is not ready for prime time. This agreement has not been talked about and discussed and bargained appropriately. So, the question the people are asking me, the question we're asking the community, and the question we're asking the city commission is, moving forward, do we want law enforcement officers to be able to use drugs and have no accountability outside the discretion of one individual? No policy that dictates an investigation. No policy that dictates further drug testing. No policy at all. Do we want to give one man the discretion to allow unchecked drug abuse within the Tallahassee Police Department? I, for one, do not, and I appreciate the community for standing with me today and inviting me today, because if this passes on Wednesday, it could be detrimental not just to our city's reputation, not just to the city of Tallahassee, but it can have real consequences on the lives of people in our community. That's why we must stand up on Wednesday. Thank you all for coming.
So the statement that I made earlier was the one that we'll leave with, and that is, it's not just about whether it's legal or not, it's about whether it's ethical or moral. And if our public officials are not conducting themselves based on the ethics and moral standards that this community should be about, then we know that we have to do something different come election time and re-election time. At this time now, I want to ask you if there are any questions that the media might have. Yes.
That's my question for one of the commissioners, Matlow, reporter. When I attended the last commission meeting, I did notice that there was some kind of dodging of questions when Commissioner Matlow was asking some questions. Specifically, the city manager kept kind of saying, "You guys voted on this collective bargaining agreement." So my question is there any documentation of the previous discussion or discourse that revolved around the last PBA agreement, and what will you be pushing for further transparency?
Restate the question a little bit.
So I think the question was the city manager, while refusing to answer any questions based on this situation, tried to shift the result to the city commission, saying that it was voted on. We checked around City Hall. We checked with the attorneys. Nobody knows how this clause ended up in the agreement to begin with. It was never flagged. It was never presented to the city commission. It looks like it may have started in 2014. But I also want to point, the city manager is wrong. The PVA contract also explicitly calls for termination. The City of Tallahassee the policy, which the police department is also bound for, calls for termination. So while he can deflect blame, he's trying to blame people because he's using bad judgment. He's allowing the police chief to use bad judgment. And frankly, if we're ever going to increase transparency and move forward, we will have to do it under a different manager. This manager is not able or capable to maintain the public trust.
How do you think that the provision that we're talking about is still in the contract?
Yeah.
How do you think I know we don't know how it got in there to begin with, but why do you think they kept it in there? There's all this concern raised.
Why? Well, so I mean, this contract obviously went through the city manager, directly negotiated with the police union. They didn't consult with attorneys. They didn't consult with the city commission, even though the city commission just had a conversation and the mayor asked for them to do just that at the next negotiating session. Why? I think we have a city manager that has never been held accountable. We have a city manager that feels emboldened to continue to do the wrong thing because he feels like nobody will stop him. So why would you remove something that the whole community knows is wrong if you're going to continue to maintain that you did the right thing by keeping this officer in place?
What would you support? What direction? Do you want them to put the brakes on this, obviously, or what will you ask for on Wednesday?
Yeah, we cannot support moving forward with an agreement with the union when we don't know the actual cost from our treasurer clerk, when it hasn't gone under city attorney review, and frankly that keeps this clause in it. Any bargaining agreement with the union that continues to allow drug use, I'm not going to vote for.
Do you support pay raises for officers, though? There are obviously raises in the new contract.
Yeah, I've said this from when I first got elected to office, which is I support paying our officers the amount they need and what they're valued at, which I think we can do. We pay them well, but we expect more from them. We expect them not to cause trouble in our community. We expect them not to be on drugs. I think it's a very even thing to say. If you're putting your life on the line, if you're going out into communities, we want to make sure you're well compensated, but we're not going to put up with this type of abuse.
Obviously, that one officer was, fired after the fight in the Tallahassee nightclub. Obviously, do you think something like this comes to, that standard in terms of, going against policy and standards of the police department with, the officer testing positive?
Well, I think if you're going to fire somebody or terminate an employee, you should follow the City of Tallahassee policy, and then you should do an investigation where appropriate. With this officer and seems to play by a different set of rules than even the other officers on the force. There's a lot of questions about why that is. And when you don't have a clear policy, nobody knows why you're using your judgment for one officer but another officer doesn't get the same leeway? Is it because do they know somebody? Are they friends with somebody? Do they have different connections? Or is it something else? I mean, those are the questions you open yourself up to when you don't do the right thing to begin with. But I think anytime there's a disciplinary action with an officer, we have to follow city policy and we have to do an appropriate investigation.
Back to the raise issue. Are you concerned that these raises in the new agreement are too big?
I'm concerned we don't know how much these raises are going to cost because we don't even have a solid number yet. I can't even opine on whether it's appropriate when we don't know the true cost to the city of Tallahassee.
So will you ask that they delay this, or what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, generally, this is way out of the acceptable norm of how we've ever negotiated contracts in the past. The City Commission has had only one closed-door session where we talk with the city manager about what should be offered. In that session, an agreement was not put forward. The City Commission did not get an idea of exactly what was going to be put forward. So what should be done, and has been done in previous negotiations, is you go back to the table, you get more information from the union, you come back to the City Commission, and it's a back and forth over multiple meetings until there's an agreement from the City Commission be like, we can offer that to the union, and then it comes for public ratification. But this is doing it all backwards, because I think, frankly, they want to get this thing across the finish line now. They want to rush this through, and if nobody will stand up to stop them, they're just going to. And when we look at every time we've negotiated a contract previously, we had a longer process. Why is it different this time?
You and Commissioner Porter have been the only ones who have been vocal on this. Obviously, the city manager, the mayor, all the other members of the commission have provided no comment publicly about this. What do you think that silence says about how they feel about this situation, how it's being handled?
Yeah, I'll be frank. I think matters of public importance should be handled publicly, and they should happen at city commission meetings, as we're told. We've heard a lot that we should handle things behind closed doors, that we shouldn't let the community know what's being discussed. That's not what we're elected to do. That's not what the state of Florida's law calls for us to do. We should be taking these positions publicly. And to be silent when your city manager is clearly violating a city commission policy, that's derelict of duty by some of these commissioners. You can't remain silent when the community needs answers. We are the elected representatives for the people of Tallahassee. We are their voice. If you agree with it, say that. Say that you want unchecked drug abuse in the police department. If you don't, let's stand up on Wednesday and do the right thing.
Good morning. Just wanted to ask, Ms. Blair was fired a couple days after that commission meeting. What do you make of that, and what is your concern about that?
I think it's concerning that we're talking about an officer who tested positive for amphetamines, who was not fired, and an HR director who raised concerns about this, who was fired. I think that's an incredible miscarriage of just management at the city. I think that we talk a lot about how we trust staff and that we should allow them to do their jobs. But when they do their jobs, for them to be fired for just doing the right thing, it's certainly concerning whether we're really going to listen to the people who are there to safeguard the city and protect the city. We're doing what we can, just raising alarm bells about it. I'm concerned. I'm deeply concerned. And there's only so much that we can do. I think that I've been very clear on the record in saying I think we need new city management. The city management is, frankly, out of control, out of step with the values of this community, out of step with the needs of this community. I think we all agree we have much more important issues that we need to be spending our time and energy and money on. But unfortunately, we can't even get to conversations about affordable housing. We can't even get to conversations about real public safety because we're dealing with a city management that's just playing games. And it's just not right.
I I have a quick question. So I know that the mayor and the mayor pro tem have been endorsed by PBA. Do you think that this is something that has influenced their decision making revolving around this process?
You know, I've always been a vocal proponent for campaign finance reform. I think absolutely. Is that something that we can rule out when you've got an organization that's supporting your campaign to the tunes of tens of thousands of dollars? I think that for anyone, that would represent a kind of conflict of interest. So I have no doubt that that plays a role in their thought process.
Obviously, there's been about, I think, 20 some odd employees who had been, terminated because of this same policy. This is the one officer who is remaining on the force with a job with the city of Tallahassee. I mean, what would the other elected officials say to those employees who have already lost their jobs, and this one person who was terminated or kept their job for violating the same policy remains with a job with the city?
I can only speak for myself, but I would say it's wrong. I would say I'm sorry that our policy was not evenly and fairly applied, and I would say that you should pursue what your legal rights may be.
Any sort of, or do you guys expect any sort of legal action from those previous employees, barring this?
I have not heard about any legal action, but I would expect it. And frankly, lawsuits are a way that we do hold our government accountable. And if we're going to have a city management that isn't holding itself accountable, then I don't blame people for finding other recourses.
Question for you regarding the whole Ellen Blair, her firing. So the city's been pretty tight-lipped about this firing. Do you think that there is a specific reason for them to not really respond to phone calls or emails about this issue?
I don't have any details about that particularly, but I do think it's concerning. I think this is a high-profile situation. These circumstances are clearly unique. This is not some random employee. This has been our HR director for many years. So I think in the interest of transparency, having more of an explanation would be important. As a commissioner, I have not even received a phone call or an explanation. So I think at the very least, that should be something that your commissioners know, if certainly not the public.
Are you concerned that could send a chilling effect throughout the workforce when you have an employee stand up and raise concerns and they're fired?
I think there's been a chilling effect for years. That's already been the case, and I think that I can personally say I support Ellen. I support the other city employees who were involved in this process, who, from the emails that I see, were looking out for the city's best interests. And that includes other law enforcement officers as well. They are residents. Their lives are endangered when they are not all of sound mind and ready to do the job that they are there to do. So I think there is a chilling effect. I think it's unfortunate. I think it's wrong, and it sets us all back.
And finally, on behalf of all of this community, let me just say this, Inman-Johnson has been around for a long time and has seen a lot. And on behalf of her nonprofit, Safe Spaces for Kids, and as we all know, kids look up to police officers, I'm going to have her, to close this press conference out, with her thoughts.
Nothing has changed that much in the city charter since I was the mayor and a city commissioner here. And just as Jeremy Matlow indicated, negotiations take place between the police department and the city executive. And when I was there, we had executive sessions where each time there was a new piece of information being brought forward to be approved by the city commission, that the city commission went into executive session and that information was presented and then taken back to the union for their take on it. As Jeremy said, this process was not followed. The city manager does not have the authority to negotiate the police contract without the involvement of the city commissioners elected by the people of this community. And that 21 employees who lost their jobs didn't get a chance to plead their case on whether there were extenuating circumstances that would have prevented them being fired. This police officer was given every opportunity that they were not given. And I know that Commissioner Matlow and Commissioner Porter cannot make a statement, but I did speak with one of the city commissioners. I spoke with Curtis Richardson and asked him if he was going to apply fairness and equal standards to all employees in city government. And his answer to me was he had no control over that. I am here to say that the city manager answers directly to the city commissioners. He has no control over what happens below the city manager, but he has control over whether or not the city manager is following the charter and following the policies of our government. And I expect them to do that. And I would hope that those 21 employees will seek recourse for what happened to them.
I want to thank everybody, thank the community, and thank everybody, the media, and finally, we'll see you guys on Wednesday.
Oh, did you really? Oh my gosh, okay. Alright, well, I just want to make sure we did not have one.
Yeah.
Great job.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Your words so much. I think it's really impactful coming from you.